little chip forward. San Jose is the covering player for Mark McGee. Shoots waiting in the middle. Yeah, that is a magnificent goal for Aberdeen. European Cup Winners' Cup, backed by that squad of players which really didn't look like this.
Yes, it really did happen. Right here in the Ullevi Stadium of Gothenburg, still rich with memories from 10 years ago. Can it really be that far back that a Scottish team from the modest size of Aberdeen took on the greatest club name in the world, Real Madrid, Royal Madrid, and beat it to become the cup-winning champions of Europe?
Peter Weir. Delights a little chip forward. San Jose the cutting goal for Aberdeen. John Hewitt celebrates. 7 minutes into the second half of extra time. There's 8 minutes left. And the Aberdeen supporters got what's there. What a great day for once and no chance at all. Just look at this jubilation scenes among the Aberdeen supporters.
It was the stuff of David and Goliath. A Roy of the Rovers romance, the dream, the fairy tale, which surely could never come true, except that it did on that historic night of Wednesday, the 11th of May, 1983, amid thunder and lightning and torrential rain, here in the World Cup Stadium in Gothenburg.
Simpson holding a trophy now. Jim Leighton did well when he was called upon on 2 or 3 vital occasions. Mark McGee going past. John McMaster with a trophy in his head.
To put it all into perspective, the Dons had then been in existence for exactly 80 years, from 1903 to 83. And even in those early days, they had produced some outstanding players for the Scottish team. Players like Donald Coleman, Jock Hutton, Alec Jackson, Benny Yorston, and the great partnership of Mills and Armstrong. But for the first 43 years of their existence, the Dons had won absolutely nothing at all. Even up until the mid-70s, they'd still won only 6 trophies of any kind. But suddenly, in 1975, there was the first hint of a new awakening at Pittodrie. It began with the arrival of a new manager, Ali MacLeod, who boosted morale and found immediate success by winning the League Cup. But soon he was gone, off to manage the Scottish team in the build-up to the World Cup in Argentina. The new momentum was taken up by his successor, Billy McNeill, great captain of Celtic, who made 2 crucial signings, Steve Archibald of Clyde and Gordon Strachan of Dundee. But within a year, he too was gone. The new manager was Alec Ferguson, a former Rangers player who had just been sacked by St Mirren that week and could hardly have guessed at the destiny which awaited him at Pittodrie. The first season, Alec, was just a season for settling in, isn't it?
I think it's also a season for assessment. I don't think you should ever do anything during a season, and we didn't really do anything during that season. Meanwhile, we were starting to lay some ground in the youth side of it, signed some good young schoolboys and worked quite hard at that. Bobby Clark and Lenny Taylor running the schoolboy training. We increased the scouting staff by maybe another 6 scouts, and we started laying the ground for a decent supply of young players coming through. So that laid the foundation in terms of my attitude to it all, and anyone who didn't fancy it then could go, but in the main they accepted it and went on with the business.
And by 1980 you were heading towards your first championship.
We were quite a few games behind Celtic at that point, coming into the turn of the year. I made a decision one Saturday morning to get a game on against Morton when it was really looked as if it should never been played, a game. And with all the kids out, Teddy, Pat Stanton, myself, brushing the snow off the pitch to get it on, and we won the game 1-0, and we just never lost a game after that.
And then it all came to a climax at Dead Easter Road.
There's Steve Archibald, and again McGee with a great chance. It comes loose, and it's a goal by Watson. Kennedy once again. Curl in towards Archibald. There's a good touch in. What goes? Sin, yes! Scanlon the scorer. Kennedy. Archibald. Now McGee. Still on it. Great run by McGee. Does, yes! Been far from a classic. But Aberdeen have done exactly everything right from this. Beautifully inside. Watson. Oh, the bar. Scanlon. Yes! What a marvellous goal to finish this match.
And you were dancing a wee bit that
Yeah,
day.
it was- It was my first big success.
Sure.
You know, I'd won the championship, the first division championship this St. but you can only equate real success to that type of victory. When you win at Easter Road in the Stell, we won at 5-0. You couldn't do better, Jack.
So that took you into Europe for the first time, but there were still some lessons to learn.
Oh, I think Europe is certainly a learning ground, all right. But one of the great lessons I always said to the players about European football, you think you're doing well and the roof falls in. We did fantastically well, we beat Ipswich.
But Strachan released the ball perfectly there for Peter Weir, taking on Mick Mills. And a goal! Weir the scorer, Aberdeen in the lead again. Kennedy curling it in again there, but too high for Weir. Well, this is Weir now. And another goal! Well, that really does finish it off for Ipswich.
We beat a Romanian side, Arges Pitești, and we got to Hamburg at home in a game in which we really should have won by 6. And we were leading 3-1 and Gordon Strachan missed a penalty kick. And they went up the other end and we got Dugroovy was taken off. And always remember that 9 Aberdeen players actually had the ball and failed to kick out of touch to allow Neil Cooper on the pitch. You know that? 9 Aberdeen players had it. In fact, Willie Miller did it twice. At that point, 9 lives were in danger.
I always regard, Alec, that the route to Gothenburg began on a fairly drab day at the start of the Scottish Cup in January 1982 at Fir Park in Motherwell, when there was an extraordinary goal scored.
A really fine atmosphere here at Fir Park, typical cup tie atmosphere. And although the pitch is a little soft on top, reasonably good, there's a great chance for Hewitt, and he scored! John Hewitt. Well, that must go down.
Young John Hewitt scored in about 9 seconds or something, 10 seconds, which is a record. It was, when you look back in any success, there's a point you say, well, we carried luck. That day we carried luck. And Fir Park was one of those, because they gave us a real doing, actually.
But that was the start which led right through to winning the Scottish Cup that year against
Yes.
Rangers.
Yes.
Won it full time, but then...
But we're always in control of that game, to be fair. They scored first, but once Alan McLeish scored, I thought we should have won the game before 90 minutes was up.
And there's a floating equaliser by Alec McLeish. 1-1, a superb goal.
But like a lot of our cup triumphs, they always went to extra time.
Strachan. Well, that's a brilliant ball. McGee, he scored. Mark McGee has put Aberdeen into the lead. McGee running very well. And it's still there. What's McGee going to do? It must be. Yes. Strachan has made it 3-1. And that is it, I would imagine. Strachan. Away goes Cooper. Cooper with a great chance. Cooper must make it 4. He does. Oh. He could hardly believe he got through eventually. And one of Aberdeen's great young players makes it 4-1. Johnstein. There is Willie Miller. Here is the jubilation. There's a kiss and there's a cup.
Now they were qualified for the European Cup Winners' Cup of 1982-83. But that domestic season started with no great sign of promise. But Alec Ferguson was still optimistic.
Well, I felt that winning the cup would open the door for them after the success of 80. And there was fresh players coming in, there was young players coming in. Neil Cooper was starting to emerge, Neil Simpson was starting to emerge. Eric Black was showing his potential, John Hewitt was already in the side. And it was starting to look very rosy in terms of the number of young players starting to break in.
So you started out in this campaign, you had the preliminary round against Seong, and of course that was a bit of a walkover at Pittodrie.
Well, it was a really wonderful performance because I'd gone to see Seong and they weren't, what I thought about them, they were a good football side. And felt they were a side that if you allowed them to play, they would enjoy playing against you. So with Cooper and Simpson really aggressive in the middle of the pitch that night and got to them very, very quickly, pressed the ball really well and run up a really good score of 7-0. And we beat them 4-1 over there, and they had a general manager, a lad called Leon Walker, who was the manager of Switzerland at one time, said to me, in Switzerland, he said, "You'll win a cup."
Really
I said, "Well, I said, why do you say that?" He said, "Well, you've got all the important ingredients. You've got great running power, you've got 2 or 3 players with outstanding ability, you're good defensively." He says, "You have a great appetite for it. And all these ingredients are really look as if you could do it."
Well, he was obviously a good judge.
Yeah. Well, had good experience, you see. He's
Right.
seen many good teams over the years. And when people tell you that within the game, that you start maybe looking at your team differently. I think you tend to be a bit of a perfectionist at times and maybe don't give enough credit for what they really are, because you're always looking to improve. And it's a thing you have to do as a manager. It's an unfortunate part of management, but it's maybe in the nature of the beast.
Then you ran into a fairly tough tie going to Albania. That's always a bit difficult.
Well, we made it hard for ourselves by the simple fact we missed so many chances in the first game, and we had to depend on a John Hewitt goal near the end. But we're hitting bums in the line, and we're hitting the post, the goalkeeper was inspired. But I felt we could get through all right, as long as we didn't do anything silly.
And then the next round was Lech Poznan.
Well, that was our cup final, really, in the sense that we'd never been in a quarter-final European trophy, Aberdeen. So the incentive to get to the European quarter-final was fantastic for us. When they first came 2-0, and I felt, that at 2-0, we maybe just a little bit on the fortunate side, because they weren't bad, actually, Lech Poznan. But we scored 2 goals, one on top of another, quickly in the second half, which settled the issue. And I was only concerned about not losing a goal at that point, and we kept it solid to the end of the game. And we gave a really good disciplined performance over there to score a Dougie Bell goal.
The Dons had won these early games against Seong, Dinamo Tirana and Lech Poznan, but now for the quarter-final. No easy games at this stage, and that draw gave Aberdeen their stiffest test yet against the aristocrats of the German game, Bayern Munich. But Alec Ferguson and his men were now soaring in confidence.
I think in Europe we'd always been confident that we had a good team, but you have to beat the good teams to know you are a good team. And the Bayern Munich game was the big one for us. To get over that hurdle, I think we really believed that we had a chance of going all the way.
This is bloody hell. This is going to be a game and a half. Because it had some great names in at the time, the Breitner and Dremler, the right back, and Del High and Hoeneß and Rummenigge, and you're saying this is going to be a hell of a game.
There was a curious historical omen that night. The Olympic Stadium in which that match was played marked the exact spot where Neville Chamberlain's plane touched down for his crucial meeting with Hitler in 1938. There may have been no peace in our time for the Aberdeen defence as the Germans came at them in raids of growing desperation, but to quote Mr. Chamberlain's successor, this was indeed their finest hour.
Yeah, I think tactically we were fantastic that night. And in a situation where you're playing a great team like Bayern, you do have to prepare pretty well and make sure that good players are kept quiet. So I felt that I had to depend and rely on Willie Miller to look after Rummenigge, Big Alec to look after Hoeneß. And they were fantastic. They were absolutely magnificent. They were.
During that visit, some of us went to the Bavarian State Opera House to see Wagner's Lohengrin, an opulent scene of dripping diamonds. But our thoughts were elsewhere. Then we crossed the street from the Opera House to the Hofbrauhaus, Munich's most famous beer hall, where Hitler gathered with his cronies to plan their Nazi party in the 1920s. And there, in the bustling beer hall, we found hundreds of Don supporters raising those massive steins of beer and giving full voice to the Northern Lights of old Aberdeen. That was in counterpoint to those oompa oompa rhythms of the Bavarian brass band. And by the time we flew out of Munich with that valuable draw from the first leg, the scene was set for what was to be the greatest night Pittodrie had ever seen. And many's the sight I've seen. Godspeed the day when I'm on my way to my home in Aberdeen.
I think at that stage of the competition, we always felt that in previous seasons, whenever we met the German teams, we went out of the competition. They were always the most disciplined, usually had the best players, and we always found it difficult against them. Against Bayern Munich, we didn't expect anything else. It was the quarter-finals, it was very important. If we got over that hurdle, then we're into new ground as far as ourselves as players and a club's concerned.
We knew that Bayern were capable of scoring goals away from home as well as at their own place. And we said going into the Munich game, if we defended well, then we'd have a good chance come back to Aberdeen. And at nothing each, after the first game, we said, well, we just have to win the game. Simple as that. A draw's not good enough.
Over the Granite City there was an air of expectancy. But nothing could have prepared us for the drama which would unfold when Bayern came here to Pittodrie on that March night of 1983 for the second leg which would decide who would go through to the semi-final of the European Cup Winners' Cup. The North East had never known a build-up like it.
You know, the funny thing, we got a great result, but I was really worried about Pittodrie. I felt we're not scoring the goal, which we should have scored in Munich, and our play deserved a goal. I felt that, you know, it was going to be a hard night, you know, and it proved right, actually.
Inevitably, it's Breitner over the ball. Augenthaler looking for a chance to shoot. And that's the moment that Aberdeen were dreading. Augenthaler with a marvellous goal, puts Bayern in front. Breaks for Cooper, now McGee. That's a great cross, Eric Black is there. It's off the line, now it's played in by Simpson, and Aberdeen are level. So Simpson, with his 9th goal of the season, gives Aberdeen a line. Peter Weir helping his defence. Now Dremler. And it's got a touch. McLeish. And that is a special goal coming in from Flugler.
Pittodrie went quiet, heads were down. Not even an equalising goal would be enough now. 2 were needed in quarter of an hour, and what kind of crazy optimist would bet on that possibility?
They put a left full-back, Flugler, who became an internationalist after that, outside left. He was 6'2", and everything was played on top of Flugler against Stuart Kennedy. And of course, Stuart was only a smallish lad at 5'8", whatever. Couldn't possibly control that kind of thing. So I gambled by taking Stuart off, as they will tell you, is the unthinkable. He says it must have been off my head. But and I put Doug Rugby to right back, put Neil Cooper to left back to quieten Dale High, and bring John McMaster on in centre midfield.
That was a masterstroke, actually.
Well, it was just mathematics, really.
And what happened after that was just Pittodrie's greatest ever moment.
Oh, it was fantastic.
Well, they couldn't agree, obviously. Strachan plays it in. The header finds the net. And Aberdeen are back in the match once more. Alec McLeish.
And we thought if we did have the chance against the Germans, since we've left it alone recently, that set play that we'd throw it in. We got the free kick in position that we normally tried it, but at the time you're saying to yourself, will we try it? Is it too delicate a time to try it? Or will we just play percentage football and just lob the free kick in and hope somebody will stick ahead at it, you know, and maybe get an on goal or something. But John and myself decided we would go for this free kick.
and we're talking away to each other, say, you hitting it or am I hitting it, you know, and you know, just to confuse the Germans. So we do where we run over it and we go to hit it, and I go by it and he goes by it, and we start arguing with each other, and the Germans is like, what's happening here? So the wee man just turns and floats one in, and Big Alex times it brilliantly, back post, and bang, it's in the net.
At 2-2, could it still be done? The cameras were still on Alec McLeish when John McMaster sent one of those long balls into the penalty box.
There's Eric Black. The goalkeeper knocks it out. It's in the net, and Aberdeen are in front. John Hewitt's been on the field 2 minutes.
14 minutes to go. Could the Dons hold out?
The problem I had, if you remember, once we got in front at 14 minutes left, and attack on the middle of the either front-wise or midfield. So then the sweating really began, because you're saying, God almighty, I can't put anyone else on. Simpson's off, Rigby's at right back now. I've no one in the middle of the park can tackle.
The final whistle amid scenes of such wild ecstasy as to confirm that this was truly Pittodrie's greatest ever occasion.
Without a doubt, I mean, the atmosphere here was something to behold. I mean, even the director's box is quite a sedate place on a match. And I can remember my father jumping up and throwing his hat in the air when the third goal went in, which was quite an occasion for Pittodrie.
The place was just electric. The atmosphere was something that will be very difficult to repeat, and something that I'm sure will stay with the players that played that night for the rest of their days.
Aberdeen would soon become a name known all over Europe. The semi-final opponents were Waterschei from the Belgian town of Genk, and their visit to Pittodrie is best remembered for a masterly performance by Dougie Bell.
A great chance for Bell. And Black gives Aberdeen the perfect start. Here's Bell again. Well, the Belgians have never seen Bell play before tonight, and they certainly have learned a lot about his close control and running power. There's Simpson going all the way himself. Would be now finding Bell. Kleister's coming across. Mark McGee. 23rd minute of the match. Alec Ferguson on the track to make a change, perhaps greeting the third Aberdeen goal, perhaps the most vital one of all. Yeah, Jensen now trying to recover. The header into the corner, and Peter Weir makes it 4. Wouldn't know it from Alec Ferguson's face, but he really ought to be very contented indeed. Strachan turning away from his marker, a great chance for Aberdeen. It's off the line. And still it won't go in. It's made it at last. Mark McGee takes the credit. 6 minutes left for play.
Well, once again, I'd gone to watch Waterschei. I was a bit wary of the Waterschei manager, because I thought he was really good. I watched his team and his tactics. And I watched a training session he put on one day, and I said, he's good at his job, him. And to get Waterschei, who were an unknown Belgian club, into that position, and they'd beaten one or two really good sides in the way, I felt that we had to really pay a lot of attention to him. And Archie and I went and saw them, I think, 3 or 4 times. So because of that, I decided to play Gordon Strachan up forward as a wide right player, forcing their good defender to have to play against Gordon. And I withdrew Peter infield to left midfield, forcing their good attacking player have to play in the park, and thereby give him a real hard time.
Before the second leg, Dougie Bell, fine ball player with the bearing of a sergeant major, was badly injured in the Scottish Cup semi-final against Celtic, and sadly that put him out of contention for all the excitements that lay ahead. In the return game in Belgium, the Dons suffered another blow to their prospects when an injury to that great right back Stuart Kennedy put a premature end to his entire career.
It was one of these sad moments in the game that it's not deserved, it shouldn't happen, but unfortunately the game of football does. In the very last minute, Stuart caught his stud just in the rim of the pitch, there was a wooden rim round the pitch, and that was the last game he played.
But they were through on aggregate and into the final of the European Cup Winners' Cup. The most common question around the northeast of Scotland and far beyond was, are ye going to Gothenburg? Aye, they were going to Gothenburg, alright, with much perusal of Scandinavian maps to see exactly where the down place was. The opponents, if we've forgotten a passing detail, would be none other than the illustrious Real Madrid, the most romantic name the game had ever known. Who could forget this great occasion?
Eintracht and fabulous Real Madrid in white took the field on a never-to-be-forgotten evening at Hampden Park. Pfaff beat Saraga in the toss, giving the Germans the choice of ends. The world's master footballers kicked off, beginning what was to be a magical display of football. From then on, Real Madrid took command. The great Di Stefano leveled the score. Another storming Madrid attack. Loy only half saved. Di Stefano banged it home. What an amazing display Di Stefano did give. Perhaps no other player in the world could have scored like this.
Here on the high plateau of Madrid, the majestic capital of Spain, the little-known name of Aberdeen would cause less excitement. They had watched their heroes dispose of Baia-Mara, Újpest of Hungary, Inter Milan and Austria Vienna on the way to yet another final. It would surely now be a formality to add one more European trophy to the cabinet at the famous Bernabeu Stadium. Who were Aberdeen, anyway?
Fortunately, the way that it worked out, that we were a Tuesday night in Watershire, so the next day I was able to travel to Madrid and watch them play Vienna.
Their semi-final?
Yeah.
Yes. And you gained a lot of heart that night?
Yeah, I fancied it strong at that time. I phoned back to Archie and I says, Archie, we've got a hell of a chance. I says, I'm telling you, what a chance we've got. And I phoned the chairman and I says, same thing to him, I says, we've got a fantastic chance.
Back in Aberdeen, the unique nature of what was about to happen had fired the public imagination to new heights. Oil had raised the profile of the city and perhaps the self-confidence of northeast folk as well. So, win or lose, they were going to make the very most of this historic occasion.
We were at the Watershire game on a Wednesday evening, and at the final whistle, we just decided there and then that we were going, dependent on the goodwill of family to look after the boys. We didn't stop to think if we could afford it or time off work or whatever. You just, all caution to the winds and off we went.
Whereas Real could pack 100,000 people into Bernabeu, but would take fewer than 3,000 to Gothenburg, the Dons depended on crowds of 15,000 at Pittodrie, but most of those people would find their way to Sweden.
Well, the excitement really was beginning to mount up as the day approached, and I can remember the atmosphere in the town. And the song that the Dons team produced, which was being played on the local radio all the time, the European song, really got the atmosphere going.
This whole area was black with people at a high point. You didn't know which queue you were going into because what you were joining was just a mass, the whole line was full. So we had signs up, stating which queue you had to join. The thing about it was the good humour of everybody. They were so excited about going there. We really enjoyed it.
How much is the trip costing you? £160. And what are you getting for that?
Nothing. Not much ticket.
And your flight?
Yeah.
No accommodation?
No.
What are you going to do after the match?
Get drunk. Celebrate.
What happens if we lose?
Still get drunk.
Back in 1983, of course, this was the biggest exodus, the most amount of people in aircraft in a few short days we'd ever seen.
We went out on deck to have a look. We went to the chief engineer and have a look out on deck. And then there was just this mass of people starting to gather down on across from the other side there at the Salvation Tower and all along the street down there. And the band was playing on the pier. The supporters were starting to come aboard then, and they were starting to rig up all these banners, etc. And of course it was all red and white. Everything was red and white. And the noise just got louder and louder and louder until sailing time. And we started leaving, and then all the ships in the harbour were blowing the whistle, and we blew the whistle, and there was just a whole lot of noise as we went down the dock.
We went out as a very, very happy party, and I would say confident, yes. I think because of the manager, Fergie has a great enthusiasm and a great way of motivating not just the players but the whole club. And we went there on top of the world.
The best laugh was the players' wives when I sent them an itinerary. Seen them in dormitories and they had to bring the sleeping bag, their own cutlery, tin mug, and had them all. And of course, they're phoning around each other. Said, I'm not bloody going. And then one or two says, disgraceful this. We were saying due to the accommodation taken up with the supporters, we got a wee small army camp with a kindly giving us their dormitories. So
You
brilliant.
were beautifully.
I was really popular.
Did your own wife fall for this too? Did you?
No, it's just a player's life. I wouldn't dare that. I wouldn't dare do that with Kathy. I value my life, you know.
I arrived on the very first plane that May Monday with a keen sense of being on the threshold of a great adventure. We waited for the team playing behind us and wished them luck on their way to a hotel with the familiar sounding name of Farzat. Farzat indeed. It was in a village 12 miles out of town.
Big Jock Jock Steen had said to me, says, don't be going to a place that's too quiet. We did that in Milan, up in the hills, and saw no one. So the players really never did capture the atmosphere. You need that to give them a tingle.
For the rest of us, the focal point would be the Europa Hotel in downtown Gothenburg, from where, on that first day of quietly simmering anticipation, we went out to explore the city. We were just trying to gain our bearings, pinpointing where the Ullevi Stadium actually was, and wandering by the harbour to see where the Sinclair would arrive from Aberdeen. We were offering a friendly smile to the folk of Gothenburg, who would be our hosts over the next 3 days. Tuesday was a bright and pleasant day as the main body of supporters arrived from all directions.
I think the boys will do well tonight. And apart from that, I'm out to have a good couple of days.
It's a very nice city. We're going to see the arts and museums. Quiet time, I think. Yes.
Heading the Scottish Armada was the ferryboat Sinclair, which normally plied between Aberdeen and Shetland. Now it was sailing to the land of the Vikings, bearing 500 warriors in red and white. The party had lasted 30 hours, but now there was serious business on hand.
It was an extraordinary experience to arrive there with all the rush of being poured onto these planes in Aberdeen and all the rest of it. Nobody knew when you were taking off, when you were going to land. And then suddenly you got there and you realised what was about to happen. Real Madrid, I mean, it was extraordinary, this sense of expectancy.
The great Jock Steen was there as the players came to train. The first Briton to win the European Cup was present as a guest of the Dons, and even his presence was a masterstroke of psychology. There was that Spaniard with the noisy drum, and the great Di Stefano too, a legend as a player and the man who starred in that great game at Hampden. By then he was boss of Real Madrid, in charge of special talents like Stielike and Metgod. The carnival atmosphere was gathering momentum, and soon the restaurants, bars and street cafes all over town were hopping to the strains of the Northern Lights of old Aberdeen.
I remember arriving at the Europa Hotel, and it was a most extraordinary sight because it was as if an entire pub, or indeed half of Union Street, had just been transplanted to Sweden, and the whole of Mark Cameron's had just been dumped in the middle of Gothenburg. And I walked in, there was a man playing the piano, and he was marvellous. He was really good, and everybody was singing, and it was great. And I turned and I said, he's a really good pianist. And somebody turned around to me, with sort of tones of mock horror, and said, so he should be. He plays the organ at King's Wells Kirk.
By Wednesday lunchtime, the fans were all here, around 14,000 of us, outnumbering the Spaniards by 5 to 1. There was a sense that we were going to will this victory to happen, whether it was intended or not. It was that power of determination you normally associate with Rangers and Celtic.
I think it was interesting because it was the underdog against the world-known team Real Madrid. And there's no question that Aberdeen had most supporters here among the neutral spectators.
As the rains came down on the day of the match, thousands of Aberdonians came crowding into this mall in great good glee, as you can imagine. Their only complaint being the price of things, especially the drink, and I'd get them a fair stammy gaster, I can tell you.
Expensive? Gothenburg just came here. Very expensive. Everything is expensive in Gothenburg.
Our mother-in-law here's just coming at him. She's coming a lot. She's coming a lot.
But they soon forgot all that when they discovered that the Cup-Winners' Cup was actually on display in this mall just behind us here. And they came to lay their own claim to that cup, even before the team had time to win it. For win or lose, this would surely be Aberdeen's finest hour, and as supporters, we were going to give it our very best shot. But reality was still dawning. If somebody had told us in the previous September that the Cup winners of Europe, all the way from Scotland to the Soviet Union, from the Baltic to the Mediterranean, would knock each other out in furious competition, and that come the month of May, the great Real Madrid would be left to face the Dons of Pittodrie in the final, I think we would have been tempted to direct our informant to a good psychiatrist.
I remember having a wee quiet moment in the hotel just before we set off, and I was reading the local papers about people no longer with us who would have been very proud to have been there that night, and it took me back to my childhood, and I can recall the memories of Dad following the team, and I remember feeling very emotional at that point, and it drove it home to me that really I was there for him as much as for anybody, you know, and great pity that he hadn't lived to see it, but there we are.
The rains came. It's impossible to remember Gothenburg without the rain, isn't it? Because we all walked out and it was absolutely drenching, and there were all these kind of cheery folk from Aberdeen and the odd Spaniard walking past, but we just seemed to own the place, and I suppose the weather reminded us of home.
And all of a sudden we came across the Olivier Stadium, which is a mass of red and white, and very little Real Madrid supporters to be seen anywhere.
I don't think it could have been better stage managed, the thunder and lightning and the downpour. And then the nail-biting tension of the game itself. I mean, there were people collapsing round about us with nervous tension. Incredible.
Our supporters were absolutely magnificent. They cheered us in, and they were even cheering the directors. They were in such a good mood. But it was a great occasion, and they lifted it and brightened everything up. And the players got a tremendous lift from that.
We were bundles of nervous energy, trying to contain our passionate hopes and secret fears. We rationalised that even defeat would be glorious in Gothenburg, but the child in every one of us cried out for victory, and the players had their last-minute thoughts.
And the tension in the dressing room half an hour before it was incredible. But you've got people like Archie Knox there and Alex Ferguson who telling a few jokes, keeping the players at ease.
You go out for your bit of a warm-up, you come back in, there's that quiet period. It's nice to hear that quiet period where the boys sit down and they actually think what their own job is that night. You know, make sure your job is being done properly.
The final, we were all shouting in the tunnel and saying, come on, let's do it, you know, for the city, the people, and just shouting in general and at the top of our voices.
I think Big Doug Rugby and Big Alec were always the head screamers in charge, and obviously more laid back than them.
Went out onto the pitch and we've seen the 15,000, 17,000 Aberdeen fans with the flags, and it was a great night.
There was a lump in every throat and unbearable tension on both benches as Di Stefano and Fergie prepared to do battle. But soon the match was underway and the Dons were on the attack.
There's Eric Black. Marvellous effort from Black. The danger's not over, but it's behind now, and Eric Black making a major impact on the match right at the start.
Striking now to find his...
6.5 minutes into the match. Gordon Strachan's corner kick sets up the chance.
So we watch in the corner kick that Al McLeish comes very late to the edge of the box.
Yes, Eric Black had scored.
Is penalised. Was Santillana was brought down. That's a disastrous moment.
So that was disappointing. I just wanted the ground to swallow me up. But it was important that I kept my nerve and didn't let it affect my game. And of course the gaffer had a few words of comfort at half-time.
No chance for Leighton.
Peter Weir was certainly playing far too deep, and we stressed to Peter that you really need to get yourself forward to receive the ball in more forward positions, or you're going to have your legs run off you. So that changed the game for us, really, because Peter Weir was unbelievable.
So then into extra time, at what point did you decide about John Hewitt?
Well, Eric Black got injured 8 minutes from the end, I think.
Yeah.
And John, come on.
Peter Weir. Delightful little chip. John Hewitt celebrates. 7 minutes into the second half of extra time. Just 8 minutes left. And the Aberdeen supporters go berserk.
2-1, of course, the players just erupted. But there was still an anxious moment in the very last minute.
Yeah. At that point, Brian Gunn's down praying. I always remember that. Dear God, please don't let him score. It's wonderful.
Last chance indeed. There goes the final whistle. Aberdeen have won the European Cup Winners' Cup.
In front of a television audience of 800 million, the dandy Dons of Pittodrie had done it. Whereas they had once reached only for the heights in Scotland and very rarely got there, they had now raised their sights to Europe and beaten the best that continent could offer.
As Willie Miller holds aloft the European Cup Winners' Cup, backed by that squad of players which really didn't have a weakness tonight. Some tremendous individual performances, one of them by Neil Simpson holding a trophy now. Jim Leighton did well when he was called upon on 2 or 3 vital occasions.
In these gaunt stands of Ullevi, we sang and danced and hugged and shouted ourselves into silence. Then quietly, we opened the floodgates of joy and let it all flow freely and unashamedly.
It was just an incredible high that we were on at the final whistle, and I'll never forget Ruby's 3-foot-wide grin. He waved to the fans. You just didn't want to leave the stadium. I can remember almost feeling frozen to the spot. I wanted to linger and savour this because I knew it was something special that I would never forget.
When the lights went down in Ullevi and the stewards had ushered us out of here around 11 o'clock that Wednesday night, all bedlam broke over Gothenburg. The main body of support headed back in towards the city, dancing in the streets, splashing in the fountains, filling the pubs and clubs, and feeling generally determined to paint this town red in every sense of the word. It reminded me very much of VE night at the end of the war, and indeed, this was Aberdeen's VE night. It was their victory in Europe.
It was a carnival. You know, they talk about the Brazilians being bizarre and throwing themselves around at football. I must say some of the scenes I saw in Gothenburg in the rain with northeasters that night caused me to think about that again.
It all happened so quickly, but I was propelled up onto this little stage. I was still absolutely drenched to the skin. I had long hair, it was hanging down to here. My rosette was all soaking wet. I was still in the cagoule. And there I was, sitting at this grand piano playing the Northern Lights, and just an amazingly emotional experience. I mean, I couldn't really see the people for tears because everyone, they were raising the roof, you know, Godspeed the Day when I'm on my way. It was a very, very proud moment.
It was a triumph for Alec Ferguson, a triumph for Chairman Dick Donald, his Vice Chairman Chris Anderson, and Director son Ian Donald, and all connected with the club.
I remember the fans walking together here, people from Gothenburg and from Aberdeen, along the big street here, the Avenue, and it was all very friendly.
There was no trouble at all. Not one single person in the police station.
No arrests?
No, not one. But there was no sober person.
It was a kind of victory for the whole community and all of us who speak like us, Jack, and who think like us, and whose, you know, hearts are still there.
It really was just the trip of a lifetime, and I would not have missed the excitement of it, the atmosphere and the pride in your local team. I would not have missed out on that for the world.
Dad had a great disposition that he took success and defeat very calmly. But even Dad, I think, in that night was so worked up, and he's a shy way of showing it. But I mean, the delight afterwards, I remember the three of us in the box and my father hugging Chris Anderson. And, you know, there was a tear in their eyes, both of them.
Back in Aberdeen, the celebrations echoed into the night. A picture in the Press and Journal taken during the match showed a deserted Union Street. 2 hours later, it was a different story, with television reporting on the scenes of jubilation.
proof, if proof were needed, that the Granite City earned the name from its buildings, not its people.
Of course, I didn't get to Gothenburg, but you went.
I went with Graham Hunter, our business manager. Do you remember that? You're jealous.
Very.
Jealous then and jealous now.
Absolutely.
My main memory, apart from the football and Peter Weir scampering up the left wing, was the weather. The rain was just lashing. Never been so
Sorry to
wet.
hear that.
but also freezing cold.
Cold.
Now, you know the stadium's called the Uleve or Uleve or something like that. Yes, yes. But I'll always remember it as the New Lavie Stadium.
The New Lavie Stadium.
Because that was the only refuge for a bit of warmth. At the back of the terracing, there was a clinically clean, state-of-the-art toilet.
Not as good as Pataudry.
Oh, not as good as Pataudry. Oh, no.
But better than Hampden.
You didn't get in there for a bit of heat.
There's never a heater in your toilet.
Leaving a toilet in your toilet.
So were you the only folk in the terrace?
Well, no, there was one other Swedish guy. He was a neutral. Well, Swedes are neutral.
So that was one Swede and 2 nips. This Swede that you were standing beside, so whose side was he on?
Well, it turned out he was on the Don side. Aye, he seemed to be slowly won over by the play.
See, I'll tell you what it was. He had been attracted by the romantic ideal of the underdog against the big guns.
No, his granny come from Torry.
After a sleepless night, it was time for the heroes to return. As the welcome home banners went out along the streets of Aberdeen, the city prepared for such a day as it had never seen before. The folk just went on holiday and filled every inch of the triumphal route from Aberdeen Airport through Bucksburn and Woodside, up Anderson Drive and down Queen's Road and Albine Place to Union Street. An estimate of 100,000 people was no exaggeration. In their open-top bus, the players were engulfed at walking pace, past the townhouse and down King Street to Pataudry itself, where another 20,000 people were gathering.
And I'm very proud to be associated with Aberdeen Football Club. I think we've done a good job, and I think the Aberdeen public has responded wonderful to us.
We all felt all along we could beat Real Madrid, and I think that's the thing that's filled the people today with such happiness and joy that they beat such a team of standing as Real Madrid.
When the boat people returned on the Friday, you could hear the roars across the harbour before they were properly in sight. And for good measure, the Sinclair added the voice of her own foghorn as warning. Those 500 fans who had sailed away in a hopeful adventure on the Monday were now returning in triumph, gaining every vantage point from lifeboat to mast. The party had lasted all day and all night, with much drink and delirium, but not a trace of trouble in the ship. Not even a light bulb broken throughout the whole week's adventure. And as they sailed into Aberdeen Harbour, there were special guests to greet them.
I got Martin McGee out of his bed to get in the harbour with me with the cup. It was a good thing to do.
Yes, it was marvellous.
It was the right thing to do too, because these people had sacrificed a lot to get across in the ferry to watch us, and I think we did the right thing there.
They were all able to touch the cup as they came off.
Yes, it did, yeah.
That was great.
They all got a photograph staying with us, sober or drunk. It was a really well-run club, but I mean, no board meetings. Dick, you had Dick. Dick was really conservative in everything. Used to say before the finals, you know, it wouldn't be a bad idea if we lost this one, you know. The players are getting carried away. I said that, but I'm not getting carried away. He says, you can forget all these silly ideas. You don't want to pay the bonus, that's your problem. But a fantastic chairman. Absolutely brilliant. Yes. And Dick and Chris was a balance, because Chris had all the great ideas. He saw ahead of television before anyone really could see it. He pushed the all-seated stadium through. They were great for each other, they were great for the club. And young Ian was coming through, so then Aberdeen's football club's in good hands.
As a matter of honour each year, the holders of the Cup Winners' Cup meet the winners of the European Cup, and Aberdeen's opponents were Hamburg, After a no-scoring draw in Germany, they met at Pittore for the decider.
Challenging, there's Neil Simpson. Yes! And Aberdeen have made it. Neil Simpson gives Aberdeen the lead 1 minute into the second half. Peter, we're happy to have Black in the box. Use his skill in the air for this corner kick. Black goes up. There's Willie Miller. Yes! Played in by Mark McGee. And the goal's been given. Aberdeen are 2 in front.
With those goals by Neil Simpson and Mark McGee, there was now confirmation of what the sports manufacturer Adidas and the magazine France Football were already declaring in their annual awards, that Aberdeen was the best team in Europe in 1983. After the peak of experience, where do you go from the top? There's almost bound to be a sense of anticlimax.
I think that sometimes that when you get great moments of elation, it's very hard to recapture them.
Almost inevitably, by 1984, the team began to break up until today, 10 years later, only 2 of the Gothenburg heroes remain at Pittore. Captain Willie Miller is now the manager, and his great partner in defence, Alec McLeish, has succeeded him as captain. Yet, having won the first trophy of the 80s, the League Championship, the Dons also won the last trophy of the 80s, the League Cup, and the first trophy of the 90s, the Scottish Cup. Now Willie Miller was shaping up a new era for the Dons.
His first touch was before I shouted 2-touch.
I feel that I've managed to make the transition quite smoothly. I've had a lot of help from the senior players. They've always been a good bunch of professionals at the club, and I think that has been in place, I would say, from the late 60s, early 70s when I first joined the club. People like Bobby Clark and George Murray, guys like that there when I was a 16-year-old, showing you the ropes and really teaching you what being professional was all about. I would like to think that I managed to carry that on and maybe hand it down to guys like Alec McLeish, who are still here and still playing and still doing a great job at the club. And I'm sure Alec then passes it on to the younger players beneath him. So it's a continuation process. It's not something that happens overnight.
Names unknown at Gothenburg arise to give new hope, like Ian Jez.
Well, I always dreamed of sort of becoming a professional footballer, and so I've got the chance here at Aberdeen, and I've been the first team for 4 years now. And I mean, as I say, I've played with Willie Miller and McLeish. I mean, what else can you ask for? I think the future's looking really bright, and I mean, with the likes of Gary Smith, Scott Booth, Stevie Wright, Andy Roddy, I think we can repeat at Gothenburg.
So to the stadium itself, home of Aberdeen FC for 90 years and the sporting mecca for thousands of Northeast folk. Now it is dominated by the magnificent Richard Donald stand, which rises not only as a tribute to the chairman, but a symbol of the club which led the way as the first all-seated, all-covered stadium in Britain. And as Willie Miller looks towards new horizons, there's an echo to inspire his efforts. It comes from Gothenburg, the dream created by Alec Ferguson and his players. The names to be repeated to our grandchildren: Jim Leighton, superb in goal; Doug Rugby, a large and glorious character; John McMaster with skill so smooth and exquisite; Neil Cooper the gladiator; Alec McLeish, one half of the greatest defensive partnership the club had ever known, along with his captain, Willie Miller, now the most important player in the history of the Dons; Gordon Strachan, the playmaking genius of the team; Neil Simpson for strength and determination; Mark McGee combining skill and power; Eric Black, the clean-cut thoroughbred; and Peter Weir, a tower of strength and creative skill in the left, along with John Hewitt, the super sub himself, and those 2 men who missed the final, Stuart Kennedy, as fine a fullback as the club had known, and Dougie Bell, with ball control to mesmerise. The immortal names of Gothenburg, a new word in the Aberdonian vocabulary, meaning a high point of experience, the greatest night of your life, or just pure magic.